Salutations, everypup, and welcome to Chapter 18 of Ignore the by NinjaPandaScholar. As always, the link to the fic will be in the description below. And with that out of the way, let's jump on into it. Chapter 18, Valentines. Mate, you have to be getting better at potions, right? Ron sighed as Neville came to collect Harry from where he was sitting by the fireplace with Ron and Hermione for remedial potions. You think you can get out of this soon? Snape can't make you stay in the club forever. Air popped up behind Neville. Nah, we just move people to tutors eventually. The second year smiled at the teen who had never spoken to her before. Last year I was a tutee, now I'm a tutor. Pretty sure I'll never be promoted, Neville said with only good humor and an arm thrown across Air's shoulders. Yeah, Ron, it's like the Mafia. Once you're in for life. Harry laughed with a smirk toward his creature friends. The what? The redhead looked very confused. Muggle version of the Death Eaters. Sort of. Hermione translated for the pureblood. Uh, Ron still looked confused. But isn't it just a club? Hurry! I got news! Colin Creevy called as he and his brother rushed past the group out of the portrait hole. Air sighed loudly. That kid has so much drama, he could power an entire theater department at Hogwarts. That kid is older than you, right? Hermione asked, looking at the girl in confusion. They had talked a couple times when Harry was hanging around her, but not much. Yeah, but I don't have any relationship drama. My family does arranged marriages, and I actually like the bloke I'll eventually marry one day. So much less drama and anxiety on my end. Air shrugged unconcernedly. Wait, what? Harry looked at her in confusion. You have an arranged marriage, and you already know about it? At 12? Who is it? Harry looked around as if to see the bloke he was going to have to go all Dementor Big Brother on now. That's barbaric! Hermione growled in indignation. Air rolled her eyes in exasperation. First of all, I'm 13. Second, romance isn't super important to my people. I'm not saying we don't love or that my parents don't love each other, but companionship, trust, and loyalty are more important than romance. That's why we know who will marry so early, to establish a relationship built on trust and friendship. If he turns out to be untrustworthy or unworthy, I can drop him faster than an ashwinder. Besides, it's not like I plan on getting married until I'm at least 20 anyway. And Harry, chill. He goes to Durmstrang. Your people? Ron asked, with a speculative look at her, realizing there must be something going on there. Valkyries, the girl said with a fierce skin. Keep that to yourself, though, if you don't mind. We don't get quite as much prejudice as most other creatures, but I'd still like to have a few more normal years at school before I'm outed. Wow, aren't you a myth? Hermione looked at the girl like she was a new research project. Harry chuckled and stood to leave. Colin had news. Hermione, the first thing we learned as we entered this world is that the myths are all true. I don't think there's anything that would really surprise me anymore that it existed. Let's go, guys. I want to hear Colin's news. Neville tugged on Harry's sleeve to get him to move. He's always good for a laugh and a good story. Fine, yes, I must. Air dramatically groaned as she headed out the door. See you all in a bit, Harry called back over his shoulder. Why did you tell them? Neville asked the Valkyrie as they approached the door to the room used by the HSMC. They either already know or will know about Harry. Air shrugged. Everyone can see how close they all are, and I would bet my favorite dagger that his species has more prejudice and restrictions on it than mine, so I'm not overly concerned. Besides, like I said, my species isn't vilified as much as others. My only danger is that you-know-who would try to recruit me and Kara because of what we are. That's our main reason for secrecy. Ron and Hermione actually already know about me, and they'll keep your secret. All three of us are fair game to be murdered by Voldemort, so we'd never tell him about you. Harry grinned at the girl, who was quickly becoming a close friend, even with their age difference. Great! Now you need to tell the rest of us. He earned a mischievous grin from Air before she opened the door. Neville patted him on the shoulder comfortingly before hurrying in and looking at the snack table. I see you were successful in shaking off Snuffles. Harry smiled at the dogless Snape, who was drinking a goblet of what was definitely blood in the corner. That name is utterly ridiculous, and the mutt is ruining my reputation. The man sneered. I promise to eat any additional strays that should show up at my door without prejudice. He makes you much more approachable, Severus. Luna smiled at him as she walked over and hugged Harry's waist. My point exactly. Snape gave her a dark look. Hey, he helped out in class today. Harry laughed at the man's consternation. My potion definitely would have exploded, and Draco's would have been useless without his help. Snape just glowered as Colin was bouncing around the room. Calm down, you idiot, and just tell us what happened. Calm down, you idiot, and just tell us what happened, Draco growled out in amused annoyance. Familia Vane agreed to go to Hogsmeade with me for Valentine's Day, Colin called out with a crow of celebration. Harry put an arm around Luna's shoulder and looked at him questioningly. What happened to Ginny Weasley? For the millionth... Keep up, Harry. Keep up, Harry. Graham grinned at him with an amused gleam in his eyes. Colin moved on from her a week ago. Now he thinks Vane will be his mate. For the millionth time. For the millionth and one time. You won't know until you turn 17. Jacob threw his arms up and plopped down on the couch beside where Neville was eating a sandwich. No sense not being prepared, Dennis disagreed, coming to his brother's defense. The two had already lowered their glamours, and Dennis was rolling his sleeves up, showing the dark druidic runes covering his skin in highly magical patterns. Hey, can we drop glamours now? Atheline asked excitedly, turning to Snape. You think Umbridge is definitely gone? My wings have been cramped for far too long. Snape looked at Harry with a warning glare in his eyes. The man obviously didn't think Harry should remark on Umbridge, but this wasn't just any group of people. They had so many secrets between them, and they were all scared. This was the HSMC, the creature's safe space. Did he tell them? Did he keep it a secret? Normally, the safe answer to that would be to lie and keep the secret, what Snape was obviously pushing for. But the fear the woman caused in the creature community was palpable. If there was any group of people who would be assured to keep this secret and that also deserved to know, it was this one. She was the bogeyman to that creature children were taught to fear. Neville, however, looked up at him with an encouraging smile, and Harry sighed out, tightening his grip on Luna a bit, hoping she wouldn't leave him. Snape sneered and rolled his eyes, clearly seeing what was coming, but he didn't stop it. So you know how Scrimgeour is interviewing everyone who saw her last, and I was supposed to have detention with her that night, but she never showed? Luna tightened her hold around him just as he had with her. He got the feeling she already knew what he was about to say. He had no clue how Luna seemed to always just know, since it had nothing to do with seeing magic. But he knew that he would be lost without her now. He may no longer have a soul in his body, but the fairy went ahead and took his heart as well. Merlin, Harry, what did you do? Harry asked, as understanding flitted across her face. I know what I hope you did, Kara muttered loud enough everyone heard. I know what I was praying someone would do. I didn't mean to, but she'd cast Crucio on me and hit me with the slicing heck and cut up my face pretty badly, Harry explained frantically. I'm not a creature that deals with pain well, and then she got in my personal space. She was just so close. There was a collective gasp of indignation and anger from all members of the club, and even several swear words that Snape ignored taking points off for. Moon's balls! I'd have drained her dry! Of course, there was nothing else you could do. The creature is going to take over in a situation like that. Bartholomew spoke up, in understanding, as his vampire would have done the same thing. His eyes seemed to challenge anyone else in the room to disagree with that statement. That woman was vile! Brooke fumed from where she was sitting by Matthew and Hestia. I'd have drowned her in that situation, and happily at that. You were only protecting yourself, Harry. Luna kissed the side of Harry's neck in support, and he closed his eyes, more thankful than ever for this group of people. He opened his eyes and looked over to the other Gryffindors since they were the ones that had to live with him. Colin and Dennis exchanged a look before Colin gave the older Gryffindor a little smile. Harry, we're all creatures, and that means we all have instincts. And there isn't a person in this room that can blame you for protecting yourself. Dennis and I may not have many offensive powers, since our magic is more ritualistic, but I would only hope that I would have fought back as much as I could in that situation as well. I just hope it was painful for her. Air gave a fierce grin when Harry finally saw part of her glamour drop and razor-sharp teeth flash in the light. Do not be complacent. Still be careful with the new High Inquisitor about, but glamours are fine to drop in this room. Snape finally spoke up from his armchair and answering the original question. That monster of a woman will never be returning. Harry ate her if we want to be specific about what happened. He added at the end with a fierce gleam in his eye, seeming to take great joy in that statement. I really do hope she tasted good at least. Luna grinned at her Dementor. So good. Harry grinned back. A few of the other students gave him a disgusted look at having to eat the pink abomination, but looked more like they were just happy they didn't have to do it. Great! So, now that the toad is gone, we can finally focus on what's important. Aurora smiled happily at the group, then turned to Matthew. How's it going with Sinistra? I'm dying to hear. We're going to do dinner up on the astronomy tower for Valentines. Matthew started gushing as Severus quickly pulled a stack of essays out of his bag so he could ignore the group. She looked up relationships amongst creatures and faculty, and there aren't any rules against it since we can't really control it anyway. Matthew continued to gush to the rest of the club. Hey, you need an alibi? Draco leaned across Neville to ask Harry quietly as he sat by Luna in the chairs beside them. You offering? Harry raised an eyebrow in surprise. Draco rolled his eyes, and Neville looked at him in happy approval. Only that if asked, I could mention I saw you waiting outside her office in the hallway, impatiently. I do patrol through there as a member of the Inquisitorial Squad. What do you want in return? Harry asked, now with suspicion. You already did it. The blonde smirked at him viciously. Unless you think you can eat the Dark Lord soon as well. Preferably before summer? I'm guessing you can't just eat him yourself? Harry asked, still not knowing what Malfoy was. Hell no! Draco's eyes widened in surprise and disgust. My diet is the same as a human. If with a little more sugar, Neville tacked on at the end. Yeah, well, my glucose levels tend to sink fast, but besides that, Draco waved him off. But no, I will definitely not be eating anyone. Talk to Graham or Bartholomew for that. Maybe Hestia. Luna looked over at the 6-year Ravenclaw. She still hadn't told anyone what she was, but knowing Luna, she definitely knew anyway. My digestion doesn't really support eating people either, Graham added on from where he was sitting with David and had heard their conversation. Gargoyles are more the tearing limb from limb type. I doubt I'd have any chance going against the Dark Lord, though. You would not. Snape spoke up from where he was doing everything to look like he wasn't listening in to every conversation. Harry thought being a vampire was probably a major advantage to his spying. Hey, Luna, the house elves gave us beetles tonight. You want any? Hestia called out from the snack table. Only if they included salsa to put on them. Luna smiled broadly. Pretty sure that's what this is. The Ravenclaw picked up a bowl that had something red and chunky in it. Yes! Luna jumped up and rushed over. I really hope you can handle her food preferences. Draco smirked at Harry as he settled back into the couch. Maybe you should get her some chocolate-covered crickets for her Valentines. Harry rolled his eyes at the Slytherin. I ate Umbridge. I'm pretty sure I can handle a few bug sandwiches. Seriously, though, Harry. Chocolate-covered crickets, Malfoy insisted with a pointed look. Take my advice. Find them somewhere. Harry nodded, and he figured that would be possible. Thanks, Draco. The blonde nodded and seemed to settle into Neville's side more. The next couple weeks seemed to go back to some semblance of normal. Scrimgour still had the school running under his iron fist and most of the added decrees and regulations. His DADA classes were actually quite good, though. He obviously knew his subjects as an Auror, but he wasn't the most patient teacher. He was basically a sterner Mad Eye Moody, if that were possible. Harry and the rest of the DA put the club temporarily on pause since they were finally learning real material, but no one was willing to completely disband it as DADA professors were notoriously unreliable. Sirius was settling in as well. He seemed to almost become the new Hogwarts mascot. He made sure to hang around Snape often, both to annoy the man and to make it clear he was pretending to be the potions master's pet, but spent the rest of his time following around either Harry, Neville, or Luna. Occasionally, he would follow around Malfoy, but that seemed to be more keeping an eye on him than actually enjoying his company. Regardless, since he was their head of house's pet and seemed to get along with Malfoy, the rest of the Slytherins accepted the scruffy Grim into their midst, much to Harry's amusement since he knew the man's prejudice against Slytherins in general. McGonagall always looked amused as well whenever the Animagus was around, knowing who it was and not seeming to care one bit. Harry had a theory that Dumbledore had spoken to her and warned her of Sirius's presence ahead of time. However, Scrimgeour looked at Sirius and Harry both with suspicion. But honestly, he looked at everyone with suspicion, so neither were worried too much just yet. As Valentine's got closer, Harry came up with a plan. He made his way down to the kitchens after putting Jamie to bed a few days before the Hogsmeade weekend. "Harry Potter, sir!" Dobby exclaimed happily when Harry ghosted through the door into the kitchens. The other house elves glanced up but went back to work, used to the Dementor being in the kitchens at this point. "Dobby! How are you? How are you doing, Winky?" Harry addressed them both. "The Toad Woman finally passed," Winky answered simply from where she was decorating a cake for dinner the next day. "Winky is much happier now." Good," Harry responded awkwardly, really not wanting to think about it. "Dobby is great! Is Harry Potter sir going with Mistress Fairy to Hogsmeade?" The house elf jumped up and down excitedly. "I am. Actually, I was hoping you would help me with something." Harry smiled at the elf from under his dark hood. "For Mistress Fairy, anything!" Dobby grinned happily. "Do you have some crickets and some chocolate? I'd like to make us some chocolate-covered crickets myself as a gift," Harry asked, wondering if they kept bugs on hand for the HSMC members. Dobby looked a little sad. "Dobby isn't very good with chocolate. Winky will have to help Harry Potter, sir." Winky turned with a wide grin to the Dementor. "Dobby will take over," she ordered, handing the tube of icing to the other elf. "He also needs to think about what we's doing for Valentine's while he's at it," she warned the elf, who looked properly chastised. Harry smiled widely at them. "Are you two doing Valentine's together? Are you dating?" "Winky and Dobby are engaged," Dobby answered Harry with a wide grin from where he was now starting to tackle the cake. "Mr. Harry Potter, sir, will be invited to the wedding." "And I'll be there. Congratulations!" the Dementor exclaimed excitedly. He had never been to a wedding before, much less a house elf wedding. He was looking forward to it immensely. "Thank you, Harry Potter." Winky patted his arm. "Now the crickets are in that cabinet over there. You get those and Winky will get the chocolate." She motioned to the cabinet in the corner. "Tell me how Dobby proposed while we're cooking," Harry asked in interest. Dobby snorted in amusement from where he was making icing roses. "Winky proposed to Dobby," he responded. "And it was very romantic." Winky started with a glare to Dobby since she wanted to tell the story. "I had just married the Toad Woman in the Sahara and decided that since we did such a good job with the Dementor as our child, that Dobby and I could try with a house elf child." "Any child of yours, Winky, will be a formidable house elf." Harry laughed, his haunting laugh, as the surprise that Winky viewed him as their child sank in. He wasn't against it, he decided. It's not like he hadn't been raised as a house elf himself, anyway. "Yes, and they's be free!" Dobby nodded in firm agreement. "That's we still debating about," Winky smirked at her fiancé. "Anyways, so Winky and made Dobby some caramels," Dobby continued with the story, rolling his eyes at their ongoing argument. Harry knew that Winky would eventually get her way, though, whatever her side of the argument was. Harry looked at the flowers he had picked for Luna sadly. He had the chocolate-covered crickets in one hand and a bunch of wildflowers in the other. They had been bright and colorful when he had first picked them. Now they were dead and dried out. To his Dementor, they looked much better, but he figured the fairy probably wouldn't think the same thing. He couldn't help that any plants he held in his hands for too long dried quickly, though. You look ridiculous, Malfoy sneered out of the corner of his mouth as he walked past to meet up with Parkinson and Zabini. Harry just smiled at him, though. On some level, he knew that he did look ridiculous, but his Dementor side is what dressed Jamie that morning. He was wearing the shiny star-covered robes that Dumbledore had given him for Christmas, and had shined his locket and bracelet until they both gleamed. He had tried to do something to his hair, but it still stuck up at odd angles. After a quick but muffled bark, Sirius brushed up to where Harry was standing and waiting on his, maybe, date. You aren't going on my date with me, Harry frowned down at his godfather, but took the 2 letters from his mouth that he was carrying. They were both covered in drool. Ew, I have Snape cast a water repellent charm next time, he grumbled while the dog gave a wheezy laugh. Putting the chocolates under his arm, Harry opened the first one that looked to be from Dumbledore from the writing. Dear Harry, I saw you leaving the castle from where I am invisibly researching in the library. I must admit, my boy, that those robes look much better on you than they ever did on me. Luna is one very lucky young lady, as you are a very lucky young man. Now, the purpose of this letter, Severus is leaving this very evening to talk with an old professor of Tom's that may have an idea about the objects we're researching and how many Tom may have made. Regardless, I think I have an idea where we might be able to find one now. I would never dream of ruining your date, so would you come tomorrow night, just before curfew, to my temporary quarters? If you would like to accompany me on my trip, I may have use of your gastronomical services. Yours, Albus. Awesome! Harry exclaimed with a grin to Sirius, who was watching a bird with a calculating gleam in his eyes. Tell him I'm in, and I'm hungry. You listening to me? Harry snapped his finger in front of his godfather's face to bring his attention back. The dog gave a very human roll of his eyes, but did look away from the bird. Fine, I'll read yours next. Harry laughed at him as he opened the one that was in Sirius's handwriting. Harry, you look ridiculous. Burn the robes. I'm serious. Serious. Get it? Why are those flowers dead? Did I teach you nothing? I swear, I'm picking out your wardrobe next time. By the way, your Dementor friends dropped off a Solus Augustus Rookwood at the Ministry this morning. I thought you would like to know. Have a great time on your date. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. And please, try to do a few things that I would do, if you catch my drift. Snuffles. Yes, I think the giant squid could catch your drift, Snuffles. Harry snorted and put both letters into a pocket. The flowers didn't start out as dead. I really did try, but it's my other magic leaking through. Same as the clothes, I guess, too. He just shrugged, though. He thought he looked good. Very shiny. Padfoot gave a bark as Luna stepped out from the entrance hall before he dashed off to chase the bird he still had his eyes on. Hey, Harry breathed out in awe. Luna had silver dangly earrings with little stars on the end that caught and reflected the light brilliantly. Her golden hair also shined in the sun from where it was pulled into a loose braid. If only her glamour was down and her wings shone, Harry thought he could die happy in that moment. Hello, Harry, Luna grinned as she reached out to take the flowers. Thank you. They're already dried so I can keep them longer. That was very thoughtful of you. Closing his mouth finally, Harry smiled broadly. You look amazing, Luna, he gasped out. I made you some chocolates. Winky helped. I didn't know how to keep the crickets crunchy in the chocolate. Luna gave a happy gasp as she took the box. Chocolate-covered crickets are my absolute favorite. She shrank down both gifts and put them in one of her pockets. Shall we go? I figured we could... Shall we go? I figured we could get some lunch first and then do some shopping, Harry suggested as Luna looped a hand around his elbow and they started to walk. She hummed in agreement. Oh, Harry, I do love those robes, she smiled. They're very happy and chase away the wax bits. I know, right? Luna exclaimed happily. He knew Luna would get it. Hanging out with Luna was as effortless as hanging out with Ron and Hermione, more so if they were arguing at the time. Plus, Luna had so many interesting stories from her time searching for creatures with her father or visiting with the other fairies in their dimension, which she did about once every year or so. So it turned out to be a Nuntu instead of the crumplehorn Snorkak. Luna laughed brightly as she finished up her story, while they slowly meandered through the town towards the store where she wanted Harry to buy a new coat. Harry was sure they were getting looks from the other students, but he never went out with anyone, and his robes were quite bright, but he didn't really care and only wanted to pay attention to Luna. For once, he was getting stared at for something that made him happy, and that was actually fine with him. That sounds dangerous, Harry remarked with a chuckle. She and her dad really did get in the oddest situations. Oh no, Nundus actually really like fairies. I think they would like Dementors too, since they have similar magic to Thestrals. Luna explained as she opened the door to the store with the tinkle of a magical bell. May I help you, dears? An older woman asked, with a smile, since hers was one of the few stores that didn't seem to be frequented often by the students on Valentine's Day, and she was happy to see customers. I need a new coat, ma'am, Harry answered, a bit embarrassed. Oh dear, yes, the woman tutted as she took in the holes and warm patches. Dudley was very hard on his clothes. Do you have anything with silver or gold metallic accents? Luna asked, causing Harry to smile in agreement. Yes, I might. The woman shuffled through several racks to see what she had. Try this on, love, she said as she handed a black coat with shiny silver zippers and silver trim to Harry. He smiled, really hoping it fit as it caught the light just right. Luckily, it was the perfect size and was infinitely warmer than the coat he was wearing. Wow, I've never had a new coat before. This one is so much better than the one I was wearing. I can't believe I thought it was fine. A shadow passed over Luna's face as she frowned. It disappeared quickly, though, as she gave him a smile and adjusted the coat a little more at his shoulders. I do think this one is perfect. It suits you. I'll take it. Harry turned back to the woman. Hey, Luna, can I show you something really quick before we get into the castle? Harry asked as he pulled Luna over towards the Forbidden Forest once they were back close to the castle. They had stayed in town the whole day, mainly just talking. Harry didn't want the day to end, but knew it was getting dark, and they needed to head back into the castle, but not until he showed her what he had been working on. What is it, Harry? Luna asked. Your magic is growing around you. Are you going to show me a spell? Not exactly. Harry focused from where they had stopped in the cover of the trees. His magic coalesced and became visible to even non-fairies as it draped around him into a dark cloud before settling into a familiar black, tattered robes that moved in a breeze all of their own. Wow, I'm impressed. The fairy touched Harry's sleeve to feel the magical fabric. I didn't know you had found a way to access your Dementor powers when you were in your old body. I've been working on it a while, Harry answered from the hood that he pushed back from his face so he could actually see him. So she could actually see him. I think I can access most of my Dementor powers from inside Jamie now. I really wished it worked the other way around too, and I could access Jamie's magical core outside of my body. I'm not defenseless then, of course, but sometimes you really want to use a good Wingardium Leviosa, and I can't without Jamie's magical core. Can you walk through walls with Jamie? Luna nodded as she pushed back his hood a little more to look into his green eyes. That's one I still haven't figured out, Harry sighed. Jamie's just too solid. I can turn him invisible, but he still just runs into the wall. Luna tapped a finger to her lips. I'll have to watch you try to see what your magic does. It might not be possible if it's your Dementor body that does something, and not just your Dementor magic. Speaking of creature magic, Harry grinned at her mischievously. You want to go flying together sometime soon? We haven't flown together but that one time on Christmas Eve. Luna laughed and pulled him towards the castle once the robes disappeared once more. If I remember correctly, my wings distract you so much you would probably fly into a tree. Harry pouted. Your wings are pretty, but I wouldn't fly into a tree. We'll have to sneak into the forest, but I bet Stubby Boardman would cover for us. She seemed to really be giving it some thought. You mean Padfoot, right? Yeah, he'd definitely cover for us if he were human, but as a dog, he isn't super helpful. Harry disagreed. Luna seemed to give that more thought. I guess we will just need to clear his name then. We only have to get Scabbers to do that. Yes, that sounds like a good idea. Luna laughed and put an arm around her shoulders. Yes, we only have to capture a Death Eater, when you put it that way. If only we had a few Dementors on our side that could walk through walls and were immune to most spells. Luna grinned back. You know, I think you would have made a wonderful Gryffindor, Miss Lovegood. Harry laughed. Hey, Potter! Hey, Potter! Has Looney infected you with her fashion sense? The two crazies finally found each other! A Ravenclaw girl that Harry recognized as one of the ones that had been giving Luna a lot of trouble recently called out nastily as they walked past. I sincerely hope that she has. Harry smiled at her brightly as they drew level with the girl. As soon as they passed, a look of utter fear and sadness crossed her face and she shriveled heavily. I'm going to eat a few of my chocolates at dinner. Luna pulled the box from her robes, completely ignoring the girl. Tell me if you like them, and I'll make more. They entered the school, leaving a bully with a haunted expression on her face behind them. Harry walked Luna back to Ravenclaw Tower after dinner and dropped off Jamie in his dorm before heading out. He met Hagrid just outside the castle, and they went into the Forbidden Forest to fly around and for Hedwig to hunt. It had been the perfect day. Hermione had smiled at Harry's contented look all through dinner, and Ron joked about Harry's robes. Luna had even come over to their table and sat with him to eat some of her chocolates, which surprisingly no one wanted any of since once she explained that they had crickets in them. So she hadn't even had to share. Hedwig got the entire story told to her as they silently ghosted through the trees. She gave approving hoots occasionally when she wasn't attacking a mouse in the underbrush. The night finally ended, and Harry floated back up to Gryffindor Tower. He figured that he'd jump back into Jamie and just lay in his bed for a while. It would be relaxing before the day began, and whatever he would be doing with Dumbledore the next night. Pulling back the curtains to his bed, Harry had to pause for a minute. Once again, there was a high elf wrapped around Jamie and completely asleep. Harry had said his words this time, but he'd been intentionally leaving a Neville-shaped hole in them just in case he needed to stay with someone again. He hadn't actually expected his friend to do it, though. Waking up once to a Dementor was unfortunate. Harry figured waking up twice to one would be cruel, so he maneuvered as carefully as possible so that he could slip past Neville's arms and into his body. The elf immediately groaned in protest. Jamie was a much better cuddler than you, was the grumble that sounded from where Nev's face was still buried in Harry's t-shirt. I'd imagine so. Harry chuckled and put one of his arms around the elf's back. Now, you want to tell me why you were using my soulless body as a teddy bear? Draco went to Hogsmeade with Parkinson, the teen mumbled, still not moving an inch, even though he had to be uncomfortable with Harry back in the body. Harry frowned and tried to pick that apart. But you said they're just friends, that he can't date her. Neville shrugged and snuggled a little closer. It's not that. I can't be his friend, not in Hogsmeade. And I can't spend Valentines with who I want to spend it with. Just lonely, and no one was around today. I didn't have anyone to hold on to. Oh, Nev, I'm so sorry. Harry sighed sadly, knowing he couldn't offer his friend comfort as he was. How about I wander the castle a little longer? You still have an hour before you have to get up, and I'm sure you'd much rather spend it with Jamie. No, stay. Neville scooted backwards, pulling Harry with him until they were close to the edge of the bed. Now, you scoot out of my teddy bear and lay down on the other side. Neville made a shooing motion with his hand, even as he was still cuddled into Harry's side. Finally catching on, Harry laughed and let go of Jamie so that he could lay down on the other side of the soulless body. The three of them were crammed onto the bed, but it was fortunately just wide enough that they all fit. Much better. Neville buried his face in Jamie's shirt again. Harry just smiled over at him, knowing Neville wouldn't be able to understand him anymore. It was a strange situation, but it worked. He'd always make sure there was a Neville-shaped hole in his wards for whenever he might need it. There wasn't anything else he could do to fix what his friend was going through, so he would just lend what little comfort he could, even if it was just his shell of a body. And that's a wrap on chapter 18. I hope you guys enjoyed this. This was a really fun chapter. Please go show the original author, Ninja Panda Scholar, some love, and please leave me a comment. I love, love, love reading your comments. They make me so, so, so happy. Please leave me specifically hate comments. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye, pups.